8-old house. Welcome back for another deep dive into some juicy details from a historical house I just researched. So this one came to me from a resident who was curious about the hedging post in front of their house. I'm not going to show you a picture of the actual one because it's easily identifiable, specific to their house. But it looked something like this, except right there was a backwards K. And she wanted to know why and how and what that had to do with the house she was living in. So that sent me down a fun deep dive rabbit hole into this house's location. One of my favorite things to do when I research an old house is to see if I can find it on a map. My city has a 1869 bird's eye view map, which was a hand-drawn map of all of the houses that existed in this town in 1869. And luckily, I was able to find this person's house on the map. It's right there. It doesn't look like anything like that today, but that shed, the basic structure of it, is still there today. And it is been a shed, it's been a grocery store, and it's currently an apartment. Let's find out how it came from each part to each part of that existence. Now this house was fun because it has existed since before 1885 according to city directories, but it's existed at 2 different addresses. Its original structure is kind of hard to determine. It didn't have a title deed or blueprint that I could find. The other thing that made it kind of tricky to track down is in the old city directories, the addresses weren't like what we consider typical addresses, where it's like number, street, zip code. So in the 1880s, let me show you what city directories in my town kind of looked like. So here you can kind of see a list of groceries, and you'll see that the addresses don't really have corresponding addresses to what we're used to. That first one is Bernard AU, which NW Core Church in Neal means northwest corner of Church and Neal. You'll see another one, Albert Hall, who was at West South Neal, 4 North Church, which meant 4 houses north of Church Street. Not the easiest to figure out on a map where those addresses might have been. So, because of the difficulty in tracking down exactly what this house's location was and who would have been residing in it without a permanent address as we like to think of it today, it was kind of hard to really start digging into it. But I was able to figure out for sure who this house's original occupants were in the 1900s. In the 1900s, Valentine Baker and his wife Sarah lived here. They had 2 children, Emma, who grew up to be a saleswoman, and Dora, who was a bookkeeper. Valentine and Sarah married in 1861 in Ohio. Aww. The other fun thing about Valentine Baker is that he is listed in several census directories as an ice dealer. That was his occupation, because obviously this was before refrigeration. So he was the one who was harvesting and gathering and distributing ice to people to put in their ice boxes to keep their town. And they died pretty close to each other. Valentine passed in 1907 and Sarah in 1911. And the house went on to their daughters. So as I said, Emma was described as a sales lady. She was a shopkeeper at one of the downtown stores in the town that we live in. And her sister, Dora, never married. She went on to be a secretary and bookkeeper and made a decent enough money at that she didn't decide to marry for whatever reason. After this point, the Wilson family takes over the residence. Now they are where we got to dig into where the horse hitch came from. So James Wilson came into the house in 1916, and he was a son of John and Jane Wilson. He was born in 1870, and he married Alma Cora Klein Creason, if that wasn't a long enough name for you. She then became Alma Cora Klein Wilson, and that's where the horse hitch came from. She was the granddaughter of one of the first doctors that lived in this area. His name was Ananias Knott, and that's where the backwards K came from. So here's one of the pioneer doctors of Central Illinois. He serviced a lot of families. He did just about anything that involved the body, because back in those days, you were sometimes the dentist and the doctor for the family. So he made a decent amount of money. He had property of his own, and he was happy to gift his daughter a horse hitch post with his name in it. Anyway, so Frank and Alma continued living there, and this horse hitch exists to this day thanks to Ananias Knott. So Frank and Alma ended up moving, and his brother Thomas took over. He turned the shed into a grocery store to make his money. So from an ice dealer to a grocery store, Frank and Thomas continued to run it. They're both listed as co-owners of this grocery store, and it existed as a grocery store up until the 1960s. In a local history group, some of the boomers in it were talking about how they used to buy candy after school from that same location when they were kids, and I just thought that was a super cute tie-in. After the Wilsons had it, his stepdaughter Shirley moved in, and it was kind of fun because her husband was a mail carrier. And while I was searching their names in the city directories and newspapers, this little article came up. So, as this guy was talking about his job as a mail carrier, he was talking about how he noticed that many of the names that he delivered to had to do with food. And so he's talking about how he would get very hungry on his mail routes while he would look at people whose last names were Bacon or Cook or Fry or Miller or Baker, as they continued on his mail route, and he would just get hungrier and hungrier as he was delivering mail. So after that, it then went on to Shirley and her husband Cecil, who were both academics. They both ended up working and teaching at the local university in town. Her husband Ross was an aeronautical engineer in World War II, and Shirley was a stenographer. She went on to teach as well, and they didn't have any kids, but they continued on in living in this house for quite a while until it ended up getting split and added on and turned into apartments like it exists today. But this was a fun little deep dive. Here's a picture of Shirley. And I hope you enjoyed these tidbits because I really enjoyed digging into this house and the long string of threads I got to go down to figure out where this hitching post came from. Anyway, thanks for following along if you got to the end of this. Definitely subscribe if you like to know more about house histories. I love to dig them out and find out more. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.